Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Today we are taking a first look into the new Spellbinders Betterpress system. This is going to be my first time using the machine. I'll walk you guys through it and share my thoughts and opinions on how the Betterpress system works. Similar to the Glimmer Hot Foil machine, this Spellbinders Betterpress system works along with your Spellbinders die cutting machines. So it really makes them a lot more versatile because you have several systems that work along with your machines to get beautiful results. It's also available now, so I'll have everything I use listed and linked down below, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Now without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so let's start off by talking about what comes inside the Betterpress kit. So first it comes with the actual Betterpress base and system here. This is what's going to run through the die cutting machine and do all the pressing. So this consists of this top plate, which is a piece of acrylic, and it's on some magnetic springs, so you'll see it has some give and some pressure there. That's what's going to do the actual letterpress. And then we can lift these off of the magnets here, and you'll see this gray magnetic base inside of here. This is great because it's got the A2 and A7 sizes, so you know exactly where to line these up in order to make them perfectly centered on your card. I love that, and I love that this is also magnetic, so it's going to hold the Betterpress plates really well in place. Then there's a couple little shims in here to improve the thickness or take them out if you need to. I'll place this right back inside. And then we have the actual base here. And this feels quite sturdy and heavy, which is really nice. And then it's got those 4 magnets on all sides. So again, this can sort of magnet into place and you can do your Betterpress. The starter kit will also come with some Spellbinders Best Ever craft tape to hold down your cardstock. This does a pretty good job, but I tend to prefer mint tape because it doesn't rip my cardstock whatsoever. So I'll have that link down below in case you want to check it out, but I like that they included this as well. And you'll also get a Betterpress plate, so this has a really beautiful detailed floral, and we'll print this out in just a second. And for the sentiment, we have "to my favorite person," both spelled with an O and an OU for the countries that spell it that way as well. And then you also get some cardstock. And this is specialty cardstock. It's really beautiful. When I took it out of the packaging, I was surprised because I heard everyone talking about it and I wasn't quite sure, if it was really too different than regular cardstock. But no, it's really super thick and it's got a really luxury feeling texture to it. I really like it. So it comes in sort of a mid-tone gray color, a cream color, and a little bit of an off-white color as well. I love that they released cardstocks to go along with it and gave you them in a sampler pack so that if you end up liking these, you can always purchase them in larger packs. They come in both card base size and they also come in larger sheets of cardstock. I believe the gray is called Pebble, the cream is called Bisque, and then the sort of off-white bone color is called Porcelain. So if you're buying this system, you might want to stock up on some cardstock as well. I really love the feel and texture of these, and I can't wait to see how they print. And inside the starter kit, you'll also get a Betterpress black ink, but there's also 2 4-packs of these mini ink pads, so you have lots of different beautiful colors to choose from as you're printing, and we'll use them throughout today's video so you can get an idea of what the colors look like. I also do want to mention that each one of these mini ink pads has a re-inker available for it, which is really helpful because these little minis run out of ink faster than a regular ink pad would, so you can easily just have one ink pad and re-inkers to keep the life of them going for a long time. And then of course on their website they've got a bunch of plates which we'll be using throughout today's video so you guys can get an idea at what some of the designs look like and check out just how beautiful they are. A huge thanks to Spellbinders for sending me this before the launch so I can share it with all of you guys, but of course, as always, I'm going to share my very honest opinions in today's video and sort of walk you through my thoughts as we go along. Alright, so to start off, I'm going to lift off this plastic top, and you'll see these guidelines that say A2 and A7 with the corner markings. This is where you're going to put your cardstock in place, and it's going to help to line it up because it'll align with the markings that are on here as well. So I'm just going to place this right down. And then I'll go in using some mint tape. Like I said, this just happens to be my favorite, but you could use the Best Ever craft tape as well. And I'm just going to tape it down right in place. And our cardstock is on and ready to print with. Then we can take our Betterpress plates. So I'm going to start off with the ones that came inside the starter kit here. All right, and then I'll place this down on the magnetic surface. And that's quite nice. It doesn't really move once you've got it down there unless you really force it around like this. So I really do like that system of having the magnetic base. And then I'm also going to place down the sentiment that says "to my favorite person" right here. And I like that it has those grid lines so you can make sure that it's nice and straight on your card before moving on. All right, so for this first one, I'm just going to start off using the Betterpress black ink just to test things out and make sure I can kind of get the hang of it before I start moving into the colors. So I'm just going to go on the surface here, and as you tap on this ink, you kind of want to press and twist a little bit. I find that's giving the best coverage on the surface. and we'll just ink up the whole stamp. So they actually made these inks with Ranger. The formulation and the ink pads are manufactured along with Ranger, so you know it's really good quality. I absolutely love Ranger's inks. You guys know that I work with them as well. So I thought that partnership was super cool, and you know it's gonna be a nice quality ink pad then. I love when brands work together on things that they do really well to bring you guys an even better product. And so this is an oil-based ink, so it's going to give you the best results. Using a water-based ink on this might kind of bead up on the surface, but the oil-based ink tends to stick a little bit better to the metal. All right, just make sure I got it good and inked. Then I'm going to place this with the cardstock facing down onto those magnets. I'll bring in my Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and then we'll place this right in. You don't need any extra plates, and we'll just run this right through our Platinum 6 die cutting machine. I'm super excited to see how this is going to turn out. All right, it's time for the reveal. We're going to lift it off. Oh my gosh, no way. All right, I'm going to lift that off. You'll see that the mint tape didn't rip the cardstock whatsoever, which I love. But the reason I'm so shocked is not just because it's absolutely gorgeous. It really impressed super nicely here, but it was really easy to run through. So it didn't seem like it was doing a ton, but this is just beautiful. And the texture in here in person is amazing. And the ink dries pretty quickly too, so like I'm running my finger over top of it and it's not smudging at all, and it's got a really crisp line. And check out all those little details they're able to get into the plate too. These florals are so beautiful and realistic. I absolutely love it. I'm gonna be completely honest, I wasn't expecting to think this was as cool as I think it is now. Since this ink is similar to an archival ink formulation, to get the ink off of the plates, you want to use a solvent-based cleaner, like the archival ink cleaner that Ranger sells. So again, I'll have that link down below. That's what they recommend to use, so use anything else at your own risk. I don't have any in my craft room right now, but I'm definitely going to pick some up so I can clean these off a little bit better. Now, when it comes to coloring something in when you use the Betterpress ink, you want to use water-based mediums. So you don't want to use alcohol-based markers because that'll make this ink run. So I'm gonna go in with my Simon Hurley Create inks. These are water-based ink pads. I'm going to smoosh them down right onto my craft sheet to kind of create a palette of colors that I want to use to watercolor with, and then we can go in and use these as watercolors. I'm excited to see how this paper reacts with the water as well. So I'll do what I always do by starting off with a layer of water first, just to get the paper ready to take the inks and make the surface a little bit more blendable. If you go right onto the surface, usually the cardstock sort of sucks up all the ink, and then you're not able to sort of blend any colors together. So I like to add the water first, and then I'll go in, starting off using a little bit of Shooting Star, which is that yellow color. I'm gonna go in and blend this color down onto the surface, give a nice wash of color. And then I'll add a bit of shading using Prom Queen and go towards the center of the flower to color it in a little bit more. And I love that pink color in the center. And then I'll repeat those same steps with the other flowers, adding a nice wash of water down first to get the cardstock ready to take any color. And then we'll go in with the yellow color first and start watercoloring it down. And I've got to say I'm quite impressed with how beautifully this cardstock takes the ink and the water. It takes the watercolor really nicely. I'm still able to blend my inks down on the surface and get a nice smooth layer of color, which I really appreciate. Then I'll move on and do the same thing with the leaves, starting off by adding a layer of water down to each one of them. And then I'll go in and add some coloring using a bit of overzealous green ink. Let's test it out without adding water first. So I'm just gonna go right in with the ink onto the surface. And it still does a great job. It still gives a nice kind of smooth blend of color, but it definitely soaks it in right away. Like I'm not mixing the color around. I'm pretty much just layering down one layer and it sort of takes all the ink. So if you want to layer colors and do sort of a more blended effect, you might want to add water down first. Adding the water also lightens the color and gives more of a watercolor look, whereas this looks like we just went in with the bold and super saturated color. So it just depends on what your preference is. And here's a look at it all dry once it's all colored in. I absolutely love the results of being able to blend and watercolor the colors, and that black ink didn't move whatsoever. It still has really beautiful, crisp, and detailed lines, which I was expecting because Ranger knows how to make a good quality ink. What I love about this is the elegance of it. It was really so simple to make, but that texture and that impression is so beautiful, and this would just be a great card on its own. Mat it onto a card base, and you've got a finished card. All right, so I'll line up my next piece of cardstock. Here I'm gonna be using a little bit of bisque, which is that beautiful creamy color. I'll tape down some mint tape to hold it in place, and then we're ready. All right, for this next card, I'm gonna go a little bit crazier with colors. So I'm gonna start off with a little bit of Wildberry. I'm honestly not too sure how this is gonna work right now, so we're gonna try it at our own risk, but I'm gonna try to get different colors on different parts of the plates. So I like these mint ink pads because you can get into more of the details of the images. So I love that they chose to do the minis. And I'm just gonna go in and sort of selectively ink just the flower portions of this first. And then I'm also gonna go in using a little bit of mulberry, which is a little bit of a darker kind of reddish purple color, and just do the centers to get those a little bit darker. They don't have a green ink quite yet, so I'm gonna do a little bit of bark, this kind of brown color. I think that'll go kind of beautifully with that pink color. So I'll just go in here and sort of ink up the leaves all around the flowers using that brown. And don't be too afraid to sort of contaminate the ink pads. Like other inks, I sort of am able to mix them together, use them on top of each other like this without being too worried about contaminating it. And if you get one color into the next, just go off on the side, wipe it off on a little rag until it comes clean, and then you'll be ready to go. All right, I'm super excited to see how this turns out. I'm going to link it onto the magnets, and then I'll run this through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine right through. All right, then we'll peel this right off and check out how beautiful that is. I love how it turned out with those different colors. So we used the pink and the purple, and then the brown for the leaves. Again, it's beautifully impressed into here, and I love that we were able to do several different colors of inks onto one plate. So don't be afraid to sort of mix up your colors and do different color combinations to get really beautiful effects like this one. From my understanding, if you're going to do a plate like this where you do several different colors on one plate, you want to do it all in one pass because these magnets are a little bit shaky on here. So if you apply it, through, and then you go through again, it might double impress it and not give you as great of a look. So I would do it all in one pass, one time inking everything up. You can also wipe this with a dry cloth once you're done, and it'll come pretty clean, but it stains just a little bit. That's no problem. All right, next I'm gonna go in with a bisque cardstock panel, and I'm going to create a really beautiful background just by using some inks to smoosh some colors onto the surface. So I'm starting off using a little bit of Clear Skies. I'll move into some Prom Queen, and I'm just smooshing this down onto a craft sheet, kind of a little bit of color everywhere. And last but not least, I'll do a little bit of Slippery When Wet, and we're just gonna create a beautiful background before we do our impression to see what the results are gonna be. Then I'll go in with some water and spray down all the inks on the surface to get them moving, and I'll spray down the cardstock just a little bit too. And then I'm going to dip this right into those inks, and you get this really beautiful watercolor looking background. It almost looks like tie-dye. Now I want to dry this first layer of ink, so I'm gonna go in with my heat tool and just start drying this background down. If you want the colors to continue blending together, you can keep dipping it in. But if you like how it looks and you want to keep adding different layers, you want to dry it in between each layer so that you get more texture and you don't necessarily create mud. All right, once that's pretty good and dry, we can then go back into the inks, and I'm just going to start tapping it right back into the color. And if you lightly tap the surface, you'll get these kind of droplets of color all around, and it's going to start building up some really great texture and dimension in our background. Again, I'll heat set it once I like how that layer looks. All right, and you can keep dipping the cardstock in to get more texture until you're happy with the result. All right, so now that we've got our background that we love, we're gonna do our printing. I'm gonna take off this top plate again, place it down into the A2 size card slot, and we can keep reusing our mint tape pieces to hold it in place. And for this, I'm gonna use this So Grateful For You plate background. This has 2 plates and 1 die in it, so it's got this really beautiful detailed background. Then it also has a sentiment and some design around it that says, I'm so grateful for you, and a die that cuts this out as well. So lots all in one set. And this sort of pattern and piece fits right in the center there, which is just awesome. All right, so I'm gonna take this large background plate, we'll place it right down into the center. And then I'm gonna go in using some of the Betterpress ink. Here I'm going to use the dark brown bark color. I'm gonna use brown because we use a lot of warm tones on our background, so I think it'll go nicely well as a great neutral, and it's not gonna stand out as much as black, which I appreciate since it's in the background. So again, to apply the ink, I'm sort of tapping and then moving it around a little bit on the surface here, and I find that that gives the best ink coverage. I love all of the intricate details in this press plate. All right, so then once that's all inked up, I'm going to flip this over, place it into the magnets, and then we'll run this right through the machine. This is so gorgeous. Again, so many details inside of the Betterpress plates. That's one thing I really love about them. The amount of fine lines and detail they're able to get is just gorgeous. And the texture all over this background is really cool as well. I do have to say, it's not like a 3D embossed texture where it's super thick and dimensional, but it's enough to make it feel like it's a really quite high-end luxury stamped effect. And doing this on an already colored background like this just makes for such a gorgeous result. So this press plate is one of my favorites. All right, then I'm gonna use the sentiment from that same set. We'll place it down into here, and I'll use that same bark colored ink to go in and ink up all the details on this plate to stamp it down. And I'm gonna be honest, don't worry about staining this magnetic base. It's going to get a little bit dirty over time because we're using permanent inks on it. And then we'll run this right through our die cutting machine. I gotta say, one thing I love about this machine is that it's super easy to use. It seems to be quite foolproof. The first time I got amazing results with it, which is awesome. Wow, like it's actually insane. Again, super crisp details in one pass. I absolutely love it. All of the little details around the edge, and it's all impressed beautifully. All right, we're gonna go in with the coordinating die that comes along in the set, and we'll line it up and tape it in place with some mint tape to hold it down while we run it through our die cutting machine. All right, we'll place this inside here. Because that paper captures texture so well, it's gonna capture all the cutting prints you have on your top plate. So that's why I'm going in with a clean new cutting plate, and we'll run it right through our die cutting machine. All right, then to put this card together, I'm going to adhere this background right down onto a top folding stark white card base. Super easy. And then I'm gonna go in and pop up that center sentiment on some foam tape to make it stand out with some dimension on the front of our card. I love how beautifully that coordinates together to kind of complete the design with the sentiment, and it just looks so stunning and beautiful with that colored background. All right, next I'm gonna go in using the butterfly swirl set. I particularly love this one because all of the butterflies are sort of cascading on one plate, and then you have all of the dies on one plate as well to cut them out. So it's only a 2-pass plate if you want all of these die cut out, which I think is amazing. All right, so this time I'm going in with a piece of the porcelain cardstock, and I'm going to tape it in using some small pieces of mint tape at the top and bottom. All right, and for this, I'll place it how I want it to be, cascading on the card there. And then I'm gonna go in using the Betterpress black ink to ink this up. Again, just going in, kind of pressing it down, and then smooshing it back and forth a little bit to get a really great impression. All right, so I'll put the magnetic top on, and we'll run this right through my die cutting machine to press it down. And check out how beautifully impressed those are into the surface. Again, tons of little detail in all of those butterflies. They're nice and pressed in, and that ink is practically already dry already. Before we move into the next thing, I wanna go back in with another piece of my cardstock, tape it right into place. And I'm gonna do the exact same background, but this time I'm gonna use that dark brown bark ink that we used a little bit earlier, and just go all in and ink up the plate again. And being careful not to move it whatsoever. We want it to stamp in the exact same spot, or relatively the exact same spot, so I'm just not moving it as I ink it up. And this is pretty easy to do because again, that magnet is pretty strong in the base. Again, we'll flip this over, place it down, and we'll run it right through our die cutting machine. And again, check out how beautifully stamped that impression is. So now we have one background in black, one background in brown, and they're stamped in pretty much the exact same spot. All right, I'm not sure if it's recommended, but I'm just gonna go in using a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Definitely do this at your own risk if you do it, but I'm just going to sort of wipe off the ink, and it definitely seems to be cleaning the ink pretty nicely. It's still stained in some areas, but it cleaned it off pretty well, and it doesn't seem to be removing those black lines. But again, do this at your own risk. I don't know if it's recommended by Spellbinders. All right, so with this brown stamped background, I'm gonna go in with the die that cuts out the butterflies. So the way you can tell is that the dies are the bronze color and the plates are those silver color. So the Betterpress plates are both labeled differently and also colored differently, so you'll know exactly which is which inside the package. And then again, we'll run this right through our die cutting machine, this time to cut it out. And again, using that same clean top cutting plate to not create texture in the design. All right, and then all of these butterflies pop right out of this background, and you have tons of butterflies to work with. So that's one thing I love about the sets that have a die and a press plate all in one set, is that you run it through once and you get a bunch of little cutout images. And the reason I stamped and cut these out in brown is so I can go back to this card and it matches up perfectly with what we've been using. And I can just go in, I'm gonna use a little bit of foam tape here and make it look like these butterflies are flying around the background, and they match really nicely with that beautiful stamping that we did. And I wanted to go back and add those because I feel like that detail is just so beautiful. It really finishes off the card nicely and adds an extra touch. So don't be afraid to go back and embellish cards. I love how these little butterflies look against that super bright and colorful background. But I didn't do this panel for no reason at all. The reason I cut it out of the cardstock where it was stamped in the exact same spot is because this acts as kind of a window which you can place over top of the other butterflies, which I love. And it gives it a little bit more dimension and depth. You could also use this to blend inks through and create some colors. You could also kind of cut it out of the front of a card and have sort of a window card like this where it opens and closes like that. but I decided to do them separate like this. So for this, I'm gonna go in with sort of a rainbow of colors and start doing my blending. Starting off at the bottom here, I'm going in using a bit of Crown Me to add that beautiful rich purple color in. Then I'll bring in some Love Struck down here as well to add some red into the mix and just blend it over top of some of the butterflies. We'll bring in some No Diving for the blue. And again, just blend this in with some of the other colors to get a really great mix of color across the surface. Next, I'm gonna go in with some Shooting Star and blend this in with sort of the red color and the yellow color. And what I love about my dye-based inks is that when they blend together, they create new colors. So when I blend with this blue, it'll create a green. And when I blend with the red here, it's gonna create kind of an orange color in between. Down here at the bottom, I'm gonna go in using some Overzealous to create some green along with that blue color. And that'll go together really beautifully and blend. And then last but not least, we'll bring some orange in here using Guppy right at the top and blend that in with some of the other butterflies. So a super smooth and seamless blend, which I love. And then I'm gonna also go in using a little bit of water in a spray bottle and just spray over top of the surface. My inks react with water nicely, so this is just gonna add some texture and dimension. You can already see it kind of starting to react there. It just adds some extra texture to the background. All right, and check out how that looks once it's dry. It's super bright, and I love how those water splotches add tons of texture to those butterflies. It turned out so beautifully and gives it more of a watercolor effect. All right, then for this window panel, we're gonna add some foam tape. I really love this large 3M roll. I'm gonna link it down below. It's a little bit more upfront, but I find that you save a lot of money in the long run because it's a lot less expensive to buy it in this big of a roll. So I wanna give this window a little bit of dimension, so I'm just going to go in with my foam tape and add it all around the edges to really pop this up and give it tons of great dimension. All right, so I've added foam tape everywhere so there's no dips in the window here. And then I'm going to start by lining this up at the top corner. We'll do it all along the edge there. And then it should line up with the stamping perfectly, and I'll place it right down. All right, and that dimension is just beautiful with having that raised window, and looking through to see those colorful butterflies is gorgeous. You could also use this die for a shaker card as well. I think there's lots of fun uses, but I just love the butterflies cascading down the card. To finish this off, we're gonna do one last Betterpress. We're gonna use the sentiment that says "so happy for you," which is from that same butterfly set. For this, I'm gonna use the Betterpress black ink again. Ink this up really well. And then we'll flip this over and place it down. And then we can go in and run this through our die cutting machine for the last time. And again, just a super crisp and beautiful impression that's got a nice debossed detail to it. Then again, I'll use the coordinating die, place it down and tape it to make sure it doesn't move. And then we'll run it right through our die cutting machine. And that finishes off the card just beautifully. Again, a pretty simple design. I love all of that beautiful colored blending though, and that window that we cut out to add some extra texture and dimension. All right, now that we're done crafting, let's recap the Betterpress, my thoughts about it, and then you can decide if it's right to have in your craft room. So let's start off with the positive things. I think this gives a really professional look to the cards with that debossed stamping. It's just beautiful. I think it would be super cool if you did a lot of wedding cards, or if you have designs for a special occasion and you want to make a lot of cards at once. This is an amazing concept, and it gives you such a high quality look. Even to create one-off cards like we did in today's video, they look stunning. Now you might be thinking you can get the exact same results with stamping. You can get a similar look, but one thing I love about it is just how intense jet black these images were, how crisp they were, and then that debossing is a super cool detail as well. Another thing that I really liked about it is how foolproof it was. You truly just need that Betterpress system and your die cutting machine. It really expands the uses of your die cutting machine to have the Betterpress system. And then of course, on my first try, you guys saw the results were absolutely amazing and foolproof. So unlike the Glimmer machine, which is a little bit difficult at first, but still gives beautiful results, this one is foolproof and gives really beautiful results as well. The paper that they sourced that I shared in today's video as well, that sort of thick textured linen cardstock, even if you don't get the Betterpress system, that stuff is super cool. I'll have it linked down below so you can check it out. So even in your day-to-day crafting, it just feels more expensive. So even if you want to use it for just stamping or inking techniques, it's amazing cardstock. Now on to the negative of this product, which isn't necessarily negative, but it's definitely something to think about. This is definitely an investment, right? I think it's about $80 upfront for the machine, that kind of starter kit that I showed you. And then for each design, you're going to have to buy new plates to do. Now, like I said, if you're using them quite a bit, if you're making lots of different cards with each plate, the investment is definitely worth it there. But if you're not going to use every single one a ton, they're definitely more of an investment than sort of a stamp would be. But you have to take that into account with any crafting product or really anything that you buy. Is it going to be worth it for you, depending on how much use you get out of it? From a manufacturing perspective, I can understand the price point though. This thing is quite hefty. It's a big solid piece of plastic here, and then lots of moving mechanisms in order to make this work. And also, they did tons of research and investments and developments to make this really come to life. There's nothing like this on the market right now, and the development to make something like this from scratch is very expensive. So big kudos to Spellbinders for making something so unique. All that being said, you guys can decide if this is right for you. Again, I'll have it linked down below in case you want to check it out, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for stopping by and watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, give it a big thumbs up, and leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts. I always love to hear them and chat with you guys down there. And I'll see you soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye.